Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Helm Developer Call, Thursday, May the 9th of 2024. And the call is recorded, so please turn off your camera if you don't wish to be on video, and also follows the CNCF Code of Conduct. So please be polite. To start off today's call, we have some announcements. That's Helm 3.15 release
So
candidate.
3.15 release candidate 1 went out, and after that I realized, hey, we never merged in the changes for Kubernetes 130. So we will have a release candidate 2. PR is up for that if somebody wants to go review it. I pinged some of you in Slack with a direct link. If that gets merged, I will cut a release candidate tomorrow morning for RC2. But yeah, we missed that little nugget. But we're on our way to 3.15 going out, which was a pretty slim minor release. We should probably hopefully try for some bigger ones in the future. That's all I've got on that one.
Is this the pull request for updating to K8's 1.30?
I'll be reviewing it shortly, Matt.
Yeah. Either way, I won't be available this afternoon to do the next release candidate unless somebody else wants to. Otherwise, it'll happen tomorrow morning, very early in the morning for US folks.
All right. I think Andy and Scott, Jason Schema, is there. I think I saw the Slack thread. They were looking for feedback. Maybe you guys get.
Yeah, I noted it on there because Andy's been doing a really great job monitoring Kubernetes Slack Helm. Was it the Helm Dev channel? Anyway, I think it was the Helm Dev channel. But the Helm channels on CNC or on Kubernetes Slack, and noticed that someone from JSON Schema said, "Hey, it looks like you all are an adopter. What do we have to do to get you all on the adopters list?" And so, I mean, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. We already have it documented, so
For quite some time, actually.
yeah. Yeah, as a courtesy, and Andy, I don't want to speak for you. I'm just trying to give some context in case you weren't able to speak, but like noted it in the Helm maintainers channel as a courtesy, and I picked up on it too. So
Yeah, as Scott said, it's basically a no-brainer as we think it is, but always want to make sure to trust and verify. So just want to give everyone a heads up saying, hey, this is out there. We'll work with the JSON Schema community to get us on the list.
All right, awesome. Scott again, pickle, which looks nice for in my opinion.
yeah, it's just one of like a number of different one of at least a handful of config languages. It's actually, there's nothing really specifically special about this for talking about Helm 4. We have a dedicated meeting for Helm 4 weekly. I haven't been able to make it the last time, and I think the time before it was just Matt and I for a short time, and I think a number of us are planning on making it this Friday. But I wanted to just raise it in the Helm Dev meeting because, I don't know, just to let folks know that this is that Paris Pittman reached out to me because we were talking about something else, and she is working at Apple, and they have this pickle config language that's been around for like a decade or something. So it only re-raised for me. I wanted to raise the conversation we had been having for a while now about possible architectures for Helm 4 to have potentially a little more robust plugin system, potentially including rendering. Or excuse me, template or manifest rendering. So that's really the only thing I wanted to say. I don't know if anyone has anything to say or think about it here, that's cool. I just wanted to at least note it in the dev call.
I do have a question. So they have a 0.6 release of their Go library. Do we know their path to 1.0 and stability in the API?
I do not yet. I'm gonna meet with them and just talk with them, mainly because I want to chat with them anyway, not necessarily because it's some official Helm thing. They're actually planning on joining, if not this one, a near future Helm 4 call, and maybe could even do a presentation on it here. So I can ask.
Yeah, and because if we're going to use it, knowing we're going to have API stability in the Go API is really useful thing. Being on 0.6, they can make changes at any time, and they're probably still figuring that out. Once it hits 1.0, I'm going to expect not to change, that kind of thing. I mean, there's ways we can wrap around it anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
My guess is that they're not following Simver because it's been around for so long. My thinking is that they just aren't doing that, but we could ask them if they can.
Well, I mean, Pickle's been around for a while, but has the Go SDK been around that long?
Oh, I see what you mean. I don't.
The Go SDK is.
I gotcha.
The Go SDK is not a year old. So Pickle's been around for quite a long time there, but they didn't do Go SDK till recently. So that's the part. Pickle itself is much more mature.
To add to the discussion, it would be nice to, especially in the Helm 4 chat, to discuss how Helm could go. Right now, Helm seems to go from like unimplemented, then once it's implemented, it's official and it's 100%. There's very little scope to have experimental features. And if like Pickle could be experimented with at the 0.6 stage, but there'll just have to be some clear way to define things as not yet stable.
So yeah, and I'll let you know in the where is it? In the chart YAML, let me see if I can find the link real quick. There is the ability to specify your engine. And that's a holdover from Helm version 2, where we had built in that complexity. And I don't think let me see if we pulled it out. But we had that in the structure. So Charge could specify Go TPL specifically, and that was the default. Let's see, is it still in the...
I don't remember seeing that field. And I have looked at that definition before, but I could be not remembering things correctly.
We may have yanked it out.
I'm on the same page as George on that one. If I actually didn't even, I knew that we had certain things like storage pluggable. I don't think I ever even knew that there was a history of that for rendering. That's awesome. We should like dig into it and follow up on that when we get to that part of it.
So here's just my quick, here's just my quick search. I'll drop a link in here. And this is from the, Helm charts repo. That's obviously long deprecated, but you can see how it was specified. And I think that has been yanked. I don't think the engine keyword is in there anymore.
V1,
it's been removed. But it was in V1 charts.
I guess I was more referring to the concept. I think it's something we should discuss for Helm 4 is how to allow more experimental features. This would just be one example.
Yeah, and this would be an example for it, but it also gives us a pattern to layer it in a way that has backwards compatibility to old school, and so that kind of thing.
I like that.
Like quite frankly, this kind of change could, we'd have to look at the rendering pipeline. I don't know if the API support it, but they may support a path to doing this today, although it may be too tied to Go TPL and API internal breaking changes. But if it's possible, we could put it into V3 today, even without going to V4. It really depends on, do our internal APIs allow it? And I have not thought about that.
Yeah,
but just wanted to
I
throw
haven't
that out
even
there.
looked. I haven't looked with that angle because I just assumed we would have to make it a breaking change. So that is really awesome to investigate.
Yeah. And what I would say about this is, this is one of those things that's got interesting little Easter eggs. So the original Helm came out of Deus, which was a division of Engine Yard. The internal variable that held what engine you were using was called Engine Yard in the code in Helm v2. They threw little Easter eggs in there back in the day. Um, so it was definitely intended functionality, but nobody came along with something and said, I will maintain, say, the pickle or the equivalent things at the time and help the Helm team maintain that. Nobody was interested in actually, everybody said, I want this, but it would be like one or two people wanted one thing, one or two people wanted another thing, and none of them wanted to help maintain the alternative options.
Right. So that's part of the conversation today, is that the idea that those could be pluggable and not required to be built into the Helm core project itself. That would be the big difference for Helm 4.
Here's a problem with that, though. Here's a big problem with that, though. You create a chart, right? Now you ship that chart to somebody else who is the chart user. That chart user just can't use a chart. Is that it?
Right.
Right.
So that's,
now you get into experience problems of delivering things. So if it's not in the Helm core and baked in, then all of those people who use it just can't grab Helm and use it. Now you've got to have extensions. So where to get the extension from? Is it official? And now you run into that complexity problem. That is, I would say, it's uncomfortable for consumers of these kinds of things. When you think of the different personas, that Helm user who shouldn't need to know all these things out there now has got a bunch more they need to know. Where do I get this other thing from? How is it signaled to me? You've got all of that experience. That's a problem.
Precisely. Yeah. I mean, that's part of the problem space, right? For at the moment, it's not uncommon to have charts that rely on CRDs for operator or for controllers that the user would need in order to use that chart. Or say there are charts that are cloud provider specific, or other things that require certain dependencies that you need to actually use them or even install them. So I'm not, all I'm saying is that it's not like that's a brand new problem, but I do agree that like the idea of like distributed plugins for different types of rendering or things like that definitely poses a new like blast radius for that problem. Yeah. So we'd have to deal with that. It's in proposal form. We haven't even written a proposal. It's really in discussion form right now.
Yeah, and there's, some of this is with CRDs, we can automatically detect and say, hey, this is not installed, or there's ways to do checks in there.
Yeah.
CRDs has presented a very interesting problem for the whole Kubernetes space, because they were not designed for applications. They were designed to be like kernel extensions. And we use the Kubernetes database, and I mean, that was their intent, was to be modeled after the idea of kernel extensions, because you're really extending Kubernetes as a core. And one of the things that for us who develop on it forget a lot is a whole lot of users are not administrators on the clusters they're at. They cannot install CRDs, especially in the enterprise. Their ops team says, here's a big cluster, you get a namespace with certain access, go. They can't install anything that requires CRDs to be installed. And if you've got two different teams and two different parts of the organization who want to install the same app, then hey, you've got a problem, because how do you manage versions between those two departments of those CRDs? That becomes a problem, and that's very kernel extension like. And so it's a problem. I mean, that's one of the big reasons you see vCluster being popular, because vCluster basically virtualizes your API control plane that you can stick into namespaces, and teams can go deal with tools like this. It's kind of a hack around it being what it was being designed for.
Absolutely. I mean, like the idea was it came from, or like, there's a tie to ultimately SIG apps, right? But charts are also used for infrastructural things as well, commonly now, even if that wasn't the initial idea. So it's like there's going to be different layers of people with different permissions that are not going to be able to use a lot of popular charts, In
fact, one of the reasons one of the things to share some more Helm history here is when they took out Tiller, it was at the request of users who wanted to use Helm, but they were not going to run Tiller system-wide with system-wide permissions, and people had really constricted namespace properties. That's also the reason we didn't do anything with CRDs or controllers when we moved on from Tiller. It was simply because there was a whole lot of users that would never work for, because they do not have those kinds of cluster permissions. And so it had to be constricted for somebody only has access to a namespace in a cluster, and they can install things. I mean, that still holds true today for a whole lot of users.
Yeah, so really it is still a related problem. So I guess the idea for different for charts, for a specific chart to depend on, in this like really work in progress idea of having different types of Helm plugins to even be able to install, is not like, I don't think it's not a universe of difference between that and say the problems that already exist with really popular charts like Cert Manager or other things that would require certain cluster permissions even to just install, you know, like people who are
Yeah.
restricted to a namespace. Good luck, you know.
But we have to
let's-
deal with them first, because a namespace restriction, right? Because if somebody has permissions to install Cert Manager, they can apply the CRDs. They can, you know, install it very straightforward. They're admins, they're experts. Is somebody, you know, how do they discover the right plugin? Because Cert Manager today, right? You've got to go do it. It's a permission problem to install, right? CRDs, we know how to detect that and do those things. Somebody doesn't have the right engine. How does an end user, say somebody goes to, you know, Artifact Hub, says, I want Postgres. They go grab Postgres, they go to install. Boom. Oh, it was built with, you know, PKL. I don't have the right plugin. What do I do? How do I do this? Where do I go from here? It's not a permission problem. They're not, you're just using a tool everybody already knows how to use, kubectl, that's well documented. What the heck do I do? What's that experience like as an end user who just says, I need to install Postgres on my namespace?
So
Right?
can I,
Thinking about that
as
story. Yeah.
as the moderator, can I interject?
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to solve this one
No.
today. So I certainly think it should be solved, because it is, to the point, it's not just the technical problem of can we make this work. It is very much user experience problem. But I was going to keep on moving in case someone else wanted to bring up anything to discuss. There isn't anything on the agenda, but I wanted to leave some time for. I was going to ask, is there any PRs or anything which is out there which could be reviewed?
Oh yeah.
I know I have one for 3.15, which was adding HTTP route to Helm create. I don't know if that made it. Let me find it. When I say I don't have the PR, someone else has.
Question, so you added an HTTP route, the gateway API to Helm create?
Someone else did.
Okay, I'm concerned because that's still quite a bit new and would break in many older legacy environments.
So it's obviously you have to enable it. So it just templates out the initial chart, the starter chart, and it's completely optional. It's not enabled by default, of course.
I didn't look at that, but is it commented out by default in the?
Let me set the PR into the doc.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that because I love Gateway API and its primitives, but most folks are not going to be using it right away.
So the thought was, if Helm supports HTTP routes from it's like it makes it much more accessible to users to start. Because right now, if I sat down, I was like, oh, I want to use HTTP route, I have to go read the docs, I have to work out the primitives, the API shape. If Helm Create supports it, I can say, oh, I can just use HTTP routes. Presuming my cluster does, of course. That's up to me to verify. That's
my concern, is the user experience, because basically you put users down a path that is not really supported in most Kubernetes environments. That's my concern.
Okay.
So most people aren't using the latest Kubernetes. Like nobody uses 130 in production right now. Very few use 129 in production right now. And so when you start going back to some of those environments, people are not using the latest and greatest. They use old versions. In fact, I think the most widely used version, typically when they do studies, is one that's out of support by the community.
Certainly. So it's completely opt-in. I mean, the
Yeah.
user's going to find out very quickly if they enable HTTP route and it doesn't work.
Now, when you say opt-in, what do you mean by opt-in? You mean, do ingress equals ingress dot enabled equals true?
So let me find the detail.
It's something like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we cannot include this. It's way too new. It has to stay on ingress for a long time, unless you want to have a way that you include both. And you have a flag that says gateway. I'm fine with that if we just default to ingress, but they have a ability to leverage an HTTP route if they choose to. That is perfectly acceptable. But I think the default should still remain in ingress.
Did this get merged already?
No.
Okay. So yeah, please share the link to it and we should review it. The soonest this would go in is 3.16. So we've got several months at the earliest. So share the link. Let's review it and see what and how to make this a good experience. Because again, this is just Helm Create and the default deal around that.
So it's in the meeting notes doc. The if I'm just trying to find by default it's disabled in Helm Create. It doesn't have the ability. I wasn't sure, Andy. I don't think it makes sense to have ingress and HTTP routes both enabled. So it's if you enable HTTP routes, you don't get ingress.
No, it should be another flag that says, the default, if you enable an ingress, you get an ingress. However, if you create another flag, it's going to be, gateway API or whatever, it will disable the normal ingress and give you the new.
So that's what it roughly does. Have a look at the PR.
Okay, I'm looking right now. Oh yeah, I see it. Yep. Okay, that might work then, but we should talk about it in the thread.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking because it's opt-in, be suitable. And it does the property that I say that it exposes a good configuration of HTTP route to users up front. But if we didn't get too soon, then sure. I mean, that's reasonable.
I mean, the new tools are already V1, right?
HTTP route V1.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is V1 now.
I'll go ahead and test this today and add some comments to the issue.
Yeah, and this is not this is not about what do we include in Helm or not, in support. This is just all about that default experience of using Helm Create that stubs something out. And remember, Helm Create is designed to use templates. It's a very weak system where people can pass in, hey, use this other template when I stub something out. That's something that we should improve on one of these days. But
I totally agree.
Good Helm 4 topic.
Exactly. I've really wanted, I don't know if you remember, Matt, but like years ago, I was like kind of hell bent on like the idea of updating Helm Create to be some sort of a wizard, where people could select options when they optionally select options when they use Helm Create. But then I got pulled onto something else and dropped that idea entirely, but might be worth revisiting.
I can train the LLM.
Yeah, totally. Hello.
So in the final 2 minutes, should we do assignments? I have to keep my moderator head on. Moderator for next week.
I can moderate.
All right.
Calendar. Next week is.
I'm in.
Oh,
I'm actually in New York next week, Scott. So I'll reach out and see what I might try and get over to Brooklyn.
I won't be available.
But I'm probably gonna be pretty busy, so I might keep my name off the.
I can't guarantee my schedule next week, so I would not like to volunteer for this one.
We have a.
If I'm here, I'll do something, but it's So 60-30. 60 I'll be here, 30 I won't.
I'll chat with Karina, because she's with me here at Bad Summit, and see if she might be able to help out, but I'll let you know.
By the way, I added the notes we talked about earlier about Helm 4 to the Helm 4 roadmap meeting doc, just
Thanks.
up on the agenda. So we can erase it from our minds now if anyone was planning on doing that.
Right. I will try to do some triage, but I may not have much time. I didn't have much time last week either, so a little bit behind. Alrighty. And I guess that's it at time. So I guess we sign off unless anybody has anything very quickly. All right. Thank you all. Most likely see you next week and tomorrow at midday. My time at least for Helm 4. Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.